আপনারা দেখছেন টকিং পয়েন্ট।
সৌজন্যে মাহবুব & কো অ্যাকাউন্টেন্টস।
Welcome back to Talking Point. Our guest today is Rita Payne, President of Journalists Association Commonwealth. And we have been talking about democracy, we have been talking about Rita's long journey and media and how media has changed and affected our life and all that, and we'll talk more about it. Yes, Rita, we were talking about democracy.
Yes, I just felt that we don't want to be too negative, because what I found is, despite the fact, as you said, there was corruption and people weren't feeling the benefits, countries with rich resources. But what I was very impressed by where I've been, that there is a generation, a younger generation, who are educated, who are independent, who have ideas. They should be given a chance to flourish. And the other thing is, and that's where I think organizations like the Commonwealth come in, and they run courses, there have to be ways in which to educate the public and the masses about democracy. And I think that was happening. In Sierra Leone, the Election Commission and the chair of the Election Commission, she's a former nun. And they trained people. They had armies of monitors going out who would talk to the villagers about the importance of voting, what to do. So, you know, there is hope. And before we move on to the next subject, I just wanted to point out what's happened to Pakistan.
Yeah.
If you look at all the publicity, everything was negative before the election. And then for the first time...
Never in the life of Pakistan's history they had a government
exactly handing over to another. Yes. Okay, there were some allegations of irregularities, but power was handed over, and it was, you know, it was very mature. And after all the threats from militants, the people went out in huge numbers to vote. They've given Nawaz Sharif a second chance.
A third chance.
Oh, third chance, sorry. I had forgotten how many times he's been back. And what is also good, it seems that he has been thinking very seriously. He doesn't want to repeat the same mistakes. So, yes, there's a chink of hope. There are a lot of challenges. But I do think that, you know, let's hope that with this chance now, and I think Pakistan was very impressed, and credit should go even to the PPP for organizing the elections. Credit to go to the people, the voters, and how mature they were.
Yeah, how motivated they were.
Exactly. So I think that was a very, very impressive, cheering development.
Yeah, talking about Pakistan, one cannot forget Benazir Bhutto. And in your career as a journalist, you have met several important ladies from the subcontinent, I think, and you must have met our present Prime Minister, Sheikh Hasina, and others. Would you tell us something about them and the people you met and how they impressed you and their views?
Yes, I've been privileged. I think that's one of the nice things about being a journalist, and I think you've done the same. We get an opportunity to interview, you know, world figures and learn, and we can get a first-hand glimpse of what it's like to run a government. So with Benazir Bhutto, I'd known her off and on, I guess, for about 10 years. And she was always very, very charming to me, though, you know, one does hear stories about her being pretty ruthless at times and so on. But with me, she was always, you know, lovely and pleasant and chatty. And she would be sometimes really ask a question. And I remember at one time when it had come to the elections, and I think it had been not clear the result, and there was a question of whether the PPP should side with Musharraf or, you know, stay out of government. And so after we'd finished and she was talking about what she was likely to do, and we turned off the cameras, and she said, so, you know, Rita, what do you think I should do? Some people say if I do this, it happens, if I do that. So there's a BBC colleague with me, and he started laughing. He said, now you're advising Benazir Bhutto on how to run the government. So she was very, very, she could seem very vulnerable, and she was such a politician to her fingertips that she instinctively knew how to address people. So if she spoke to, say, Radio 5, she would immediately come out with characters in EastEnders.
Yeah.
And I remember a friend telling me in India, who wasn't a fan, that when Benazir appeared on TV in India, she was very modest sort of wife and daughter-in-law and so on, and she was saying, you know, I've had tragedy in my life, and you know, my brother was killed and my father was killed.
I've
and
been living away for
mother.
8 years from my husband.
So there was that side, and you know, even towards the end, when there'd been a lot of talk about when she would go back to Pakistan or not. And I remember there was a lot of danger. And so the last time I met her, before she actually left, after being away from the country for so long, she said, I just feel I have to go to my people. And so she went, and tragically that was the end. I interviewed her on the radio just before that, and she was very excited about going back. And she felt, you know, the time was right, and I think she felt that if she didn't go back, she might fade from politics. Again, Chandrika Kumaratunga, we interviewed her shortly after there was a bomb explosion attack by the Tamil Tigers, and she was still pretty hyped up at that stage when she gave us the interview. So she came and she sort of, even after the camera stopped, she talked for about an hour, and she was reliving what happened in the morning. And she was saying that, she says, you know, normally my children don't want to come with me to rallies, but she said, I asked them for some reason that day to come, and they didn't. She said, just as well, because she said, had they come, they would have been on the side of the worst of the explosion,
faced the full blast,
where they would have faced the full blast. And then she revealed for the first time then that she'd lost the sight of one eye. And then I also asked Sheikh Hasina on her way back, when she was being allowed to go back to Bangladesh. And, you know, there'd been a lot of hassle and criticism. And I said, you know, with all of this hassle, why do you want to be Prime Minister? And she started laughing. She said, my people know me. But what did strike me with all of them is I think they were quite isolated. Because what happens, you're surrounded by people who tell you what they think you want to hear. So you get removed from the people. You're shielded from anything unpleasant. So you just have this aura and this wrong impression that everybody loves you, and you don't face reality.
Yeah, but shouldn't they, I mean, I'm not pointing my fingers at anybody, but shouldn't they try to get information from a second, third source, see, rather than depending on the same close aides that are always around them? And it's easy to understand that they want me to listen to this and not the other side of the story.
What I found quite intriguing in talking to them, which I found disappointing, and I shouldn't just talk about female politicians, but this is my experience, is they all seem to be so busy saying who's on my side, who's not, who's doing this, who's turning against me, who said something bad about me, that I've never heard them really talk about issues like poverty, like education, like actually doing what they were voted in for. It just seems to be constantly fighting to stay in power, which I find disappointing.
Which is for 5 years anyway, isn't it? I mean, it can't go beyond that. I mean, then comes the election, and you have got to get over it. And then right now we have election, the last year of this incumbent government in Bangladesh, and elections will be held sometime early next year. Now the point is, one party doesn't want to go and join the elections unless there is a caretaker government in place, you see. And the incumbent party government, they won't listen to that, see, and so the people suffer, see. There are protests, there are demonstrations, and in our part of the country or the world, it's called hartal, which is a strike, you see. And as long as it is peaceful, it's okay. I mean, everybody has a right to express his opinion, see. But when it gets out of hand, and there's looting and burning and arson and all that, see. So who is affected? The impact is on the economy, see. The poor people, the wage earners, the laborers who earn daily bread by working out in the field, in factories. If factories are closed, they can't work, they won't get paid, you see. So I think that this kind of attitude is not helping the economy, not politics, and obviously not democracy, the kind of democracy we want. I mean, yeah, democracy is, I mean, many countries we go to vote and elect our people, see, but then we want also the fair share of the wealth that belongs to everybody. Would you agree?
Absolutely, and I feel in the case of Bangladesh, I remember when I was at the BBC, whichever government was in power, there was always protests and boycotts, and as you say, the poor people were suffering. And I was very struck. I was taking part in a seminar in the Maldives a few years ago, which was on politics, the role of civil society, and the role of the opposition. And I was very struck by then Ken Anthony, who is now the Prime Minister of St. Lucia. He had been Prime Minister, then he was in opposition. And one very important thing he said, I've only realized from being in opposition how important it is to have a strong opposition, because it tests the government.
True. That's the whole idea.
Yeah, which is what the true spirit of democracy, that if there a way to say that obviously there's rivalry, obviously you want to be in power, but the end of it, why did anybody go into politics? Hopefully they do that to improve the lot of the people. If the people suffer, then what's the point of destroying everything for your own personal ambition? And I do feel that with a country like Bangladesh, when it's got resources, it's got so much to admire. It's got people like Muhammad Yunus. Its NGOs are thriving. They've got very independent women. The flood preparedness level has been commended. And I think there's potential for Bangladesh to be way up there. But at the moment, I think the sort of constant politics, the pulley, is holding the country back. And that means it's giving politics a bad name. And one has seen what can happen in various countries. When democracy doesn't work, you know, you've got the military waiting in the wings, which could be very dangerous.
Yeah, this is what is scary. Have you interviewed Dr. Yunus?
No, I haven't. I've tried, not for want of trying. He's always in great demand. I've heard him speak, I've had his book, but no, he is on my list. We would really like him, you know, to be interviewed, especially.
So would I.
Yeah.
So would I. I've had the opportunity of meeting Benazir and interviewing her, but we had some ups and downs during the interview. But you know, when the cameraman wanted to take pictures, out came her scarf from the bag. See, that was very interesting for me. How do you feel? Well, your wealth of knowledge about media, see, this media business, print, electronics, it has changed so much, see. Do you think the print media has a future? Do you think there will be more to electronic media than what is existing right now, like Facebook, Twitter, and what have you, emails? Do you think it has changed, but is it going to influence our life more than it has already?
I expect so, because if you could look at every day, you can see changes. Now, at the moment, if you think of what's going on in Turkey, and you know, the Prime Minister's already blamed Twitter for, as he's fomenting the trouble, because that's how messages are being sent. If people find their voices are blocked in other ways, they resort to social media.
That's what they said in Cairo, I think.
They said that in Egypt, they said in Tunisia, the same thing happened. Wherever we've had this protest movement, it's to say Iran,
Libya,
it was all through Twitter. I'm a late convert, because even about 3-4 years ago, I was a bit scornful. And I remember thinking, I'll never get into Facebook, I'll never get into Twitter. And it sucks you in. And I do find that, you know, with Twitter, everybody is a journalist. Now, I remember going to a conference looking at the future of the media in Spain. About 10 years ago, and they were talking about young people only getting their news on the internet, not listening to traditional radio or TV. I thought, wow, that's ridiculous, that never happened. I find with Twitter, I get all my news from Twitter first now. Yeah. So it has affected the way I think, and I think it's going to happen more and more. The boundaries between who's a journalist, who isn't, have gone. Because now everybody's a journalist.
A citizen journalist.
A citizen journalist.
On this very positive note, Rita, I'm getting messages from our control room that time is up, and we have had a wonderful time having you with us. It was an honor and a pleasure. Thank you very much for making time for NTV.
Thank you. I'm delighted to come, and I'm very happy. So I hope the listeners themselves, or the viewers, will also be happy with the interview.
We'll meet again.
Thank you.
Some sunny day. Thank you. Nice having you with us.